Really?
Yeah. You need to practice anyway. You're gonna f it up anyway. You might as well.
Oh,
get
that's
one
true.
in.
That's true. Are you recording this? This could be good. Maybe it's already started.
Yeah.
This is
This
just
could be on
us.
the black screen. Like we could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to And Co. Joe.
Sorry, I'm late.
And Co is a conversation series here at Yard that began in the global pandemic, and we'll get to that in a moment.
I think it's just pandemic, not global pandemic.
Well, it was global.
But I think pandemic, it's included
Oh,
in
that
the word.
Really? So you can't like have a pandemic?
It's like Pan Am Airlines. That means around the world. Pandemic. Pan.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you're already correcting me.
Should I come back in?
No, I think we're good. So you can't have like a pandemic in Kentucky or Ohio. You have to. It's global.
No, that would just
that would
be
be
a day in
a
Kentucky.
demic.
Yeah.
Okay.
A locodemic.
A local demic.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't.
Live local.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So here we are, And Co. We're bringing it back.
We're back.
And we're bringing it back with me and Joe today to talk about Yard. Seems kind of arrogant and egotistical, but we're launching a new brand, a refreshed brand,
Yeah.
and a new website. And we thought this would be a good time. We're about going on 6 years old next month. We've been through a lot as a company, learned a lot, and a lot of that is manifested into what we're seeing with this new website and our new mission statement, if you will, our new purpose statement. And so we're going to dig into that today a little bit. And then this will be the launch of And Co, kind of continuing on with some of our other friends and partners, hence the word And Company, And Co, that we get to work with around the country. We get to work with really smart, creative people who are doing really good work to revitalize places. And so we're going to be sharing those stories with you over the next several months. Hopefully it's something that people enjoy and we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
So
Let's dig in.
let's do it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about our history, me and you.
Okay.
I'm going to let you start.
Where do you want to start?
How did we meet?
How far back do you want to go?
When did we first meet?
Well, I think I was in town in Cincinnati visiting for work.
Living in Pittsburgh.
I was living in Pittsburgh, came down here when you had just taken a new job at Walnut Hills Redevelopment Foundation. So I first met you in a kind of client capacity. You were new to your role. We were in town working on a project for multiple neighborhoods around the city, but Walnut Hills was one of them, and so that's where we first crossed paths. Is how I remember it.
I think I met you at
2011.
Parkside Cafe with Cameron Ross. I think you guys were having breakfast and I was having breakfast and
Yeah, we were walking around a very different Walnut Hills in 2011, and I think you did stop by. Say hello.
Great. And then fast forward what?
I think I finished your pancakes.
Yeah, you definitely finished my pancakes, which became a trend. That's still in effect. But fast forward what? 5 years later?
Around that time.
2016, 15,
16.
4 years later.
Yeah.
You're moving to Cincinnati from Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Because Erica, your wife, is a lifer here. Was born and raised
Born
here.
and raised here. Yeah, we had a 1-year-old at the time. None of our families were in Pittsburgh, and we were expecting our second, and so it became clear to us that we needed to be around family. It was a hard decision. We loved Pittsburgh. We loved our situation there. Loved the people there. But it really became important and clear to us that we had to move down here in around 2015. And so when we made that decision, you were one of the first people I reached back out to.
Right. So I had to look you up in LinkedIn or something, like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. We grabbed Coffee Emporium downtown.
Yeah.
Mainly to talk about where you might work when you move to Cincinnati, where you might live, just that sort of thing. But the conversation kind of took on its own life. We started sharing stories about what you were seeing in your work around the country and even globally, what I was seeing work in Walnut Hills. This sort of the way I've always described it is we were starting to see downtowns, even in Midwestern cities, revitalize, and this sort of top-down approach to downtown revitalization, which makes sense to a degree, was not translating just one street over into neighborhoods. And we were seeing sort of a bottom-up approach take off, this what we came to call demand discovery, or testing demand to shape supply in neighborhoods. And that conversation just really dominated the coffee meeting.
Yeah, it's amazing how many of the kind of insights or uncoveries we made in that initial conversation still kind of live with us today.
Yeah.
We talk about stuff.
Yeah, so out of that, we became friends. I think more,
Well, I wasn't sure yet.
and there's still some questions.
Yeah.
I think from both perspectives. It depends on the day.
Yeah. Mine's pretty consistent.
I feel I feel pretty good today.
Okay, good.
That I just got here this morning.
I have a hard 12, by the way.
Okay, good. All right. I'll keep an eye on the time.
Okay.
Anyway, so we then became friends, jokes aside. Kept hanging out. Our families got to know each other. And one time we were hanging out, my recollection of this is we were at a bar, we got a beer, and we had been continuing this conversation about kind of formalizing our thoughts around this demand discovery, testing, and shaping supply, and how it was this sort of touched on a lot of things. It touched on faster and better revitalization. It touched on real equity and community engagement and people getting their hands dirty. And we were starting, I think, to think about how it could affect how we create plans, but we wanted to formalize it into some kind of a book or something. And we wrote a PDF at one point called 5 Ways to Activate Your Neighborhood This Weekend, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And then we stumbled literally, over to the launch of People's Liberty. The launch of the construction of People's Liberty in Over the Rhine across from Finley Market. Am I remembering that well?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it all kind of collapses into one 15-hour day. But I think they were separate days. The initial coffee shop and
it moved kind of fast.
Coming into the People's Liberty Sweatbox.
So we hung out at People's Liberty's Sweatbox. Yeah, it was hot. There was a lot of fans. We can probably pop a picture of that up, actually. And we kind of put in the back of our mind maybe we could apply for this someday. We didn't apply so eventually they launched. They launched their first round. I think we applied in the second round, received the grant, and then spent longer than anyone else finishing our project.
Yeah.
But it took us probably 8 months, and we would get up at 5 a.m. on Sundays and go to People's Liberty a lot of times and work and write the playbook.
Yeah.
With young kids we both had young kids at home. I don't know how we were doing this with obviously support from our wonderful wives.
Yes.
Yes.
Who are probably not watching.
Yeah, that's true.
But and that's how I remember it. I distinctly remember there's like a work part of the People's Liberty format for the type of grant that we received from People's Liberty was to kind of hang out in their shop. Was it a day or a weekend or something? It was like a little
they had like
concentrated blitz.
Almost
where
like
you were supposed to go from your initial pitch to essentially a fully formed executable plan for what the project was. Kevin and I think we barely got out of what is our pitch. And we had a lot of homework.
Barely. Our design partners were BLDG, and I remember them being frustrated.
Yeah.
My mom was there for some reason.
Yeah.
She was in town.
She should be a future ANCO guest.
Yeah, she should. That would be a long one.
Two-parters.
She is watching this, so let's be nice. We banged our heads against the wall for 8 months. The design was very important to the book. BLGG was amazing to work with on that. And it became this fun little book that we started getting asked to speak around the country on. And so we spent, a year bouncing around to everything from, your more regional APA type stuff to keynoting statewide conferences.
I mean, it started because People's Liberty is a very Cincinnati-centric thing. It started with that being the audience, and we were kind of sharing it with folks and friends and people doing the good work. But then, I don't remember the pathway, but it quickly became a national thing where we were selling, not just a copy here or there, but hundreds of copies, coast to coast and internationally. And like you said, people found it worthwhile to then bring us out and not only talk about it, but we did that workshop in DC. And
with the NeighborWorks America.
Yeah, so doing workshops around it, and I think it was around that time we started noticing that, or experiencing that people didn't just want to kind of absorb the information or buy the playbook. They wanted to work with the people behind it and work with the methodology in their place.
Right.
I thought that was that was a kind of seminal moment. I think before we get into that too much, though, we should also talk about briefly the kind of mental struggle while we were making the book of do you make it free or not, and why we went with the print-only version. In fact, I would struggle to even find the PDF for it. We went back and forth. We asked some friends, kind of meditated on it, and decided to make it something that you actually had to have. It couldn't just live in an obscure file on your desktop and use. It was meant to, we always said, we sized it so it could fit in your back pocket or your handbag. It was meant to be beat up, dog-eared, written in. It was meant to, just like our work is today, to kind of get dirty and kind of be at the front lines of the work. And in that way, it became a much more useful document. And in fact, we've had repeat buyers because their first copies got so dinged up and used. And so to this day, it's still only available in print as a useful tool, and now is available in multiple languages.
Yeah, and I would also be remiss if I didn't bring up that there was a video that was shot of us at People's Liberty that maybe Chris behind the camera today shot, maybe not.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he
one.
did.
Yeah.
Wasn't you, Chris? No. Where Joe has the best resting bitch face.
Oh yeah.
Throughout the video. So
Still have it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna have to show that.
Yeah, you probably already got it.
Yeah.
A couple times.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you've gotten better.
Well, the streetcar had just started, and the streetcar was
were
outside the window.
You were watching, looking at the streetcar. You were just
and it went by every 15 minutes. And
Okay.
Dinged its bell, and I was like, oh, that's new.
Easily distracted, I
Yeah.
guess. So into the company. So we started to good one.
Yeah.
We started to think about a company because of the workshops and the getting asked to do things. And my background was in sort of on-the-ground implementation. Yours was big on master planning design, background in architecture. And we saw this opening for a real, using the playbook philosophies as our foundation, as a company that could be implementation focused, could be focused on really meaningful active engagement, and create plans that really created movements of people behind them, not just documents. And so that was kind of the founding thoughts of the firm. And that then, tell me if I'm missing something there, but then that led into naming it, which became one of the hardest things I've ever experienced.
Before we get into naming, which was way more stressful than naming any of my kids.
Says a lot.
Yeah, it says a lot of how much I participated in that
That's
process.
true, yeah, good point.
But before we get into naming, I think we had many ahas in the lead up to launching Yard, and kind of to this day, but one of the first ones I remember having is that it was pretty unique in the landscape of revitalization, master planning, community development, urban real estate, to have a group that was, going back to a phrase you mentioned earlier, that was focused on both the supply and the demand side. My world was heavily on the supply side. I was accustomed to developing conceptual architecture, master plans, vision documents for whole new cities, and then handing that off to a client that hopefully would be able to go do something with it. Kevin's experience was on the other side of that equation, where receiving that kind of guidance, commissioning it and taking it in, but then having to roll up the sleeves and going and implementing it. And what we had started to talk about in what became Yard was, for the first time that I know of, combine those two under one roof, under one kind of full wraparound set of services that helped not only create the empathy around the implementation side, but then customized the supply side recommendations to meet that client where they were, and kind of lay out a very implementable pathway to bigger and bolder things. I thought that was one of the first kind of light bulb moments that started leading into what the hell do we call this thing?
Right. Yeah, and you were really important in that phase, because I was coming from no background in the consulting world, so I didn't have a good sense of the industry and what was missing. So you shaped,
which was also an asset.
Right, but you were able to see, I think, farther ahead than I could in that way, and so and that does flow well into the naming, which my recollection is we actually had Yard as one of the first options that we really liked. Yeah. And then, of course, that's where we landed. But in the middle, we had about 1,000 text messages. I'm sure there's a Google Doc that still exists with a bunch of horrible names that we will not, even show people.
Someday.
And some were
Maybe
good.
for our 10 years.
But we wanted to balance the line of creative, new, fresh. We never wanted to name the firm after ourselves, which happens a lot in our industry. We didn't want an acronym for our last names. We didn't want it to be Wright Nickel Associates.
It would have probably been Nick Wright, but yeah.
I think Wright Nickel flows better, but yeah, we never had that argument, but
Yeah.
but we could have, but we didn't. And yeah, do you remember some of the worst ideas?
Well, we said we weren't going to share any.
Okay, well, I mean, just one.
No, I actually.
You blacked it out. You blocked
There
it
was
out.
one. Okay, the weirdest one was Seed Wonder Society,
Yeah,
which
I recall that one.
sitting on the other side of the table, if I was looking at hiring somebody that does what we do, I would certainly look at that one twice. So
But only twice.
it passed the eye-catching
Right.
test.
Yeah.
And as interesting as it was, I have a hard time imagining that would have gone anywhere.
Yeah, so the balancing act was we wanted to be hired by cities and developers and corporations, but we also wanted to stand out.
Yeah.
We wanted to fit into the industry, but create a clear choice between us and the more established firms.
Yeah. And that over time, as it got filled with meaning, that people would start to associate it with that, going back to the idea of both the supply and the demand side.
So to bring things full circle, so we then had like 2 or 3 different versions of Yard. Like one was Wonder Yard.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the others. One was probably just Yard.
Now you're just listing them all.
Yeah, I don't remember. So we went and we sat down to bring it full circle, we sat down with Megan from People's Liberty.
Yeah.
And her husband, DJ. And I think it was Megan or DJ, but we'll give them both credit, who said, you should add "and company." Makes it sound a little more solid. The ampersand would be a good visual to play with, which you can see from the new website that we're doing that. And also the idea of "and company." The reason we were attracted to Yard was this idea of a space where people could gather and create
Born right out of the playbook.
meaningful outcomes. I think that's why we kept coming back to Yard. And then this idea of "and company" made it sound a little more solid, but then also to the point of "and co" being what we're calling this podcast. It was our partners, our friends, our family members gathering with us, being invited along for the ride of like revitalization of a community or project.
Yeah, it goes back to the idea that we come back to it time and time again. It's not about building a plan, it's about building a movement. And that "and company," as it kind of gained traction in our thinking of how to communicate about ourselves, really came to embody that idea that it takes kind of arm-in-arm movement to change places.
That's right.
Yeah.
So then we launched the company.
We did.
2018?
2018.
April 9th. You remember the date?
I remember
I don't
it
remember.
because
I forgot our anniversary.
We were in Grand Rapids.
Oh, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
We were in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and this was I think a unique experience. We were launching on the morning of April 9th. We had already started responding to calls for work before we turned the lights on. And somehow,
We were shortlisted.
much credit to Grand Rapids, they saw through a company that didn't even have a website turned on to a pretty well executed pitch.
Go back and look at that RFP.
Yeah, and
proposals.
we were up against, I won't name the names, but we were up against titans of industry, let's say.
Big timers.
The big multinationals. And
I had never
us.
done an interview for a project before.
Yeah, and we had just
Which they recognized.
Yes, they were very clear about that. And we didn't really even know how to talk about ourselves at this point. I'm not sure we owned up to the fact that that was our first day. But what was nice, it was challenging, is we had stayed up all night the night before finishing the website for the company rather than getting ready for the pitch.
The newsletter and scheduled all that to be basically launched. The newsletter sent out and the Instagram post, the Facebook post went out while we were probably interviewing. Downtown Grand Rapids.
And the best thing that ever happened on that trip is that Founders closed at 10.
Oh, that's right.
So
we were a little stressed about launching a company and
we were
interviewing.
in a horrible Airbnb.
And we're in second worst Airbnb.
I slept in a kid's bunk bed. It was like 4.5 feet long.
Second worst Airbnb I've been in. First was in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Now we're just
not,
turning this
I mean,
into,
not to pick on Erie, it was just a bad choice of an
Yeah.
Airbnb. But yes, horrible Airbnb. We were wanting a beer.
yeah.
I think we found one probably,
Sure.
but Founders was closed. They were throwing a concert or something, and it was a ticketed event. So that was probably the best thing that happened. Yeah, we didn't go to Founders Brewery, which I've never been to.
Grand Rapids, if you're watching, will come back.
Yeah, maybe we'll come full circle and eventually work in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, maybe.
Call us.
Can we flash the number?
Yeah, 1-900 Build with Yard. All right, so we're taking too long here.
Operators are standing by.
I don't know if anybody's still watching, but let's keep going.
Yeah.
We'll see how the viewership is on this. It's our first Anco.
Shaking off the rest.
It might just be my mom and your mom watching at this point, but maybe not.
My
We've got
mom's too
some
down.
good stuff to discuss. So, over the years, the last 6 years, we've learned a lot. We've worked in probably 25 states. We've had clients that have ranged from philanthropic organizations to corporations and developers and cities, of course. And we, I think there's two ways to think about this, the kind of projects we've had and what we've learned and how that's shaped this new website and brand, but also just from a business sense side, we've seen pretty good growth year over year. And even during the pandemic, which is where Anco first started. Anco first started as a way to talk to our friends on Zoom about what they were seeing on the ground during the pandemic. Yeah. See how I didn't say global?
You're learning.
But we've grown over year. The pandemic really opened, I think, some doors for us because we had been talking a lot about activating spaces, gathering outdoors, shaping design through activation, of course. And so a lot of that became pretty mainstream during COVID.
Yeah, no, I'd say kind of going back to that Grand Rapids story, projects like that, we had to kind of bend and break open the job description to match our approach because nobody was writing RFPs or nobody was asking for the art approach because it didn't exist yet. Then very quickly after that, when the pandemic set in and shortly thereafter, it was amazing the shift that happened in how work was being procured and asked for. No longer were we having to kind of contort ourselves and contort the job into our approach, but there was a much greater acceptance in the market, in cities, developers, who understood the value in how we had always kind of thought of things. And so from that perspective, that really did fuel a lot of growth through the pandemic and beyond. It was during the pandemic where we started doing a lot of site builds and kind of more substantial activations and management of those activations in several places. And yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but also very, very recent.
Yeah, and throughout that, I think it's kind of been an interesting experience has been that we've, for the most part, except for a couple exceptions, have never really posted a job. Yeah. And so a lot of the people who work for Yard today, we're about 10 people now, have found us through our work, have seen some element of our work and sent us a message. And
or
I think
volunteered at one of our
events. Volunteered. And I think that's been great because it sort of, means from the get-go that they fit into the belief system of our company, that they fit into the culture. I mean, Brooke in Indianapolis saw the work in Fort Wayne, Lane and Landon Ferguson in Oklahoma City, had been with Better Block and had seen our work related to
Norfolk.
that, to the Norfolk work. Ed in Tulsa had seen our work in the Global District at the CNU Legacy Charrette. So it's been this. Andre was a student who came back. Daniela, you and I both knew previously. Yeah. And so our hiring has been somewhat organic, but it's also shaped the company. And that's been a big part of this website and brand launch, that we're now doubling down on some things. Videography with Chris on our team, branding and place branding, municipal branding. We're going beyond project branding. Yeah. So that's been an interesting development in these last few years.
Yeah, and I'd say without exception, we sit down every December and think about, okay, what does the next year look like? It's never gone according to how we thought it might. And so there's surprises around every corner. I was just looking back the other day, I was trying to find a file, just eyeballing it, our project files. We've done over 100 projects in 5 years. That's pretty amazing, ranging from small little storytelling projects to massive site plans, and in some cases comprehensive plans for whole cities or regions. It's a pretty amazing body of work that continues to grow and diversify year over year.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, but what would you say your favorite project is?
I don't pick. It's like picking your favorite kid.
You don't have a favorite kid?
Least
favorite?
Yeah, no, that one's.
It is hard to pick a favorite project with Yard because we've had so much variety. I mean, We've had Open Norfolk, and then We Collab in St. Louis, which couldn't be really any different in many ways.
Right.
I mean, they had the same philosophy. So we've had the Palm Beach work, which was interesting in its own right, and then Indy City Market. So it is kind of impossible to pick.
It is, yeah.
But I think the beauty of it is just waking up each day, coming to work, and having just the variety of types.
Well, and kind of flipping that to the other side of the table, like, it's amazing who finds us and the problem they have that needs solving and why they're attracted to our approach. Most of our work still comes in the door, not through RFP or kind of a competitive process, but people who are attracted to our methodology and our approach and the personality of the team. I think, to your earlier point, it's this field has been created where we're kind of connecting with really interesting people. And when we had everybody in Cincinnati for our retreat in December, having all 10 people in the same room for a couple of days was pretty awesome.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was the first time all the ingredients had really been mixed up, and it was an awesome sight to see. And a lot of good came out of it. We learned a lot about ourselves that we're putting into practice right as we speak.
And as we wrap up this conversation, a couple other things. That the identity, what we've learned from projects, who we've hired, has really informed where we're sitting today, how we've designed our new office, which is, this mixture of shared workspaces, private workspaces. We have a retail storefront that we're going to be activating. We have a side lot we're going to be activating. We have what we call the pit, which is where we can have we've already had at least one charrette here. And the flexibility of this space really does fit, going back to that coffee we had, the playbook methodology and the adaptability.
Well, even its location. Yeah, it's if you just kind of looked at it on a map, it's right in the middle of everything. But we always have this interest and curiosity around what's just around the corner, and we're tucked away on this little side street, kind of hidden in plain sight. So even and we readdressed the building to face ostensibly was the back.
Pleasant Street.
And so even locationally, this really fits our worldview and our approach. It's been fun working here for 6 months now? Not even 5 months?
Yeah, 6 maybe. Yeah, it doesn't get that cold in here. I was worried about the winter, but it's well heated.
We paid
it's
for
important.
It. That was the biggest line item, was the HVAC. So I hope it's
all right, so to put a little bow on this, because one of the reasons we did this was to talk about the new website and brand. I think one thing that is interesting is that our first ever, that morning in Grand Rapids, our first ever Instagram, Facebook post, the social media, MySpace, I got to get my MySpace joke in there, was let's change the way places change. And as we were going through this brand refresh and thinking about the language of the new brand and website, we kept coming back to this idea of change the way places change. And that being sort of part of our formation story and why we took a risk with small children at home to start a company, because we felt that the way places change needed to change, that the process was in many ways broken. We weren't seeing that cities are important, walkable places are important for a variety of global reasons, and that if we don't fix how they change, then we will continue to run into these walls. And it's interesting to see that kind of come back full circle after 6 years and tee up the next 6 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nothing else to add there?
I'm sold.
Well, the other piece of this too is this idea, now that we have this comprehensive team, with all these different backgrounds and skill sets is that we're this design build firm for places.
Yeah, that, I almost mentioned that before because I think without saying it that way, that's what we were talking about 7 years ago when we were writing the playbook. That rather than, there's tons of examples of design build firms for buildings, but there really wasn't and still really isn't a peer group out there that takes a comprehensive kind of one-stop shop to building places. And from the very earliest stages to creating a grassroots movement or a vision for what the future of a block or a whole district or neighborhood or a downtown, all the way through staffing up, fundraising, developing a brand and identity, activating key aspects of the district to start to shape what gets built. We have found that approach works just as well in a place that isn't growing as a place that is completely freaked out about the pace of change and growth. And so, we kind of, without knowing it, kind of backed our way into something that we'd already been operating from, is this idea of a firm that is a design build entity for places that I think really has started to formalize, going back to the staffing growth and kind of following people's passions and skill sets where they go, into these 5 key areas that we're now focused in that kind of embody that full range of services that a design build firm would have.
Yeah. All right, any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I'm excited that we're back doing ANCO. And we got this new kind of
table kitchen.
in the kitchen to do them from.
It's a real kitchen, not a green screen.
Yeah, right. And I think we have some great guests coming up that will keep this movement going again.
Yeah, we talked with Ross Chapin of Pocket Neighborhood fame.
Yeah,
we've got Strong Towns National Gathering and CNU coming to Cincinnati in a few weeks or a couple months. Probably record some ANCOs with our friends there.
Yeah,
it'd be exciting.
Chris, thanks for doing this and leading the charge back into the space, and
right.
Excited for what 24 has in store.
Let us know what you think of the website. Unless you don't like it, then just
keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself. I'm happy that it's launched. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And look out for more ANCOs. We'll be producing some more of these. I think it'll be fun to learn from our friends and partners and allow other people to kind of see into the work and the day-to-day of Yard.
Yep.
All right. Cool. I think this is where the end credits go up. You walked in late. Do you just want to walk out?
Sure. I gotta go.
Okay. See you later.